All right, welcome to 6.7. In this lesson, we're going to be clearing decimals from two-step equations. It turns out that you don't have to deal with fractions or decimals in equations, and we're going to deal with decimals today. All right, so let's solve this equation. So we're going to subtract 10 from both sides. We get 2x equals 2, divide both sides by 2, x equals 2 divided by 2, which is 1. Well, that was a very easy equation. What's that about? Well, let's see. It says evaluate the expressions. All right, so 0.2 times 10. Now, we learned earlier in the year that when you multiply by 10, you just move the decimal point over there. So 0.2 times 10 is 2. 1 times 10 is 10, all right? And 1.2 times 10 is, right, because you move the decimal point here, but that's sort of obvious. And then 1.2 times 10, we move the decimal point because we're multiplying by 10, and it becomes 12. Well, let's look at this equation. Now, I could subtract 1 from both sides. I get 0.2x equals 0.2. Divide both sides by 0.2. And 0.2 divided by 0.2 is, right, if you have the same thing, top and bottom of a fraction, is 1. Now, if you actually had to do it, remember you can't have 0.2 out there. You would have to move the decimal there, move the decimal there, and change it to 2 divided by 2, but that's still 1. It's 1 either way. Okay, so, but what's the point of all this? Well, let's look at the two equations that we had here. So, turns out you never have to deal with decimals in equations. I had 0.2x plus 1 equals 1, let's 0.2, and I'm going to use a little color here to, all right. And so what I did to create the first equation we solved, which was way easier, and because it had no decimals in it, it had nice whole numbers, is I moved the decimal point there and made that 2x. But if I do that, I have to move the decimal point everywhere, all right, because you have to do everything to both entire sides. So we have to remember that 1 has a decimal point already. It's right there, and we move it, and so that 1 becomes 10, right? The 0.2 becomes 2, the 1 becomes 10, and the 1.2 becomes 12. And that equation and the one we just solved both have the same answer, yet one is easier to solve because it has no decimals in it. Yeah, these are called equivalent equations, and what's going on here is I multiplied both entire sides by 10. When you multiply by 10, you end up moving the decimal point. So let's see that today. All right. So both of these have the same solution, the same answer, right? Because if I move the decimal point there, I can move it there and move it there. I have to do it all three places. 0.3x becomes 3x. 1.5 becomes 15. 4.5 becomes 45, and then you get to solve this one instead of the one with the decimal points. All right, and both of these though have the same answer. That has the same answer, 10. 0.3 times blank minus 1.5 equals 4.5. The only number that can go in there is 10, just like the one on the red one. But the red one is easier to solve. Okay. So on this screen, we're just going to practice clearing the decimals. It says clear the decimals from the equation. All right, so if we move it here one time to make that 2x, then we got to move that and make it 6. And then here's the key, right? Where's the decimal point in 3? Right there. And you got to move it there and fill in the empty space with a 0. You must clear the decimals from every single term. You're multiplying both entire sides by 10 there. What's happening? Okay, now this time we're going to have to move the decimal twice here to make 3x. So that means we have to move the decimal twice in every other term. 1, 2. So that doesn't become 2, it becomes 20. We move it twice here, and that becomes 11, right? You have to move it and then see if you have empty spaces. If you have empty spaces, you put zeros in them. But those two equations have the same answer. Now what's going on? When you move it once, you're multiplying both entire sides by 10. When you're moving it twice, you're multiplying both entire sides by 100. That's what's going on. So that's what I just said. Multiply both sides of the equation by 10, 100, or 1,000 to clear the decimals from the equation. So let's show this. We're going to move it twice there, so twice there, and then twice there. And then we're going to understand that we're multiplying both entire sides by 100. All right, that's what the shortcut is doing. And the new equation is 9x plus 50 equals 370. All right, you move it twice everywhere if you move it twice in one location. All right, so now we're going to need to move it 3 times, right? So that means you got to move it 3 times there. It's not move it to the end. It's move it 3 times, the same amount everywhere. 1, 2, 3. Okay, so write your new equation. And what this is we're multiplying everything times 1,000, right, is what's going on there, both entire sides. So that becomes 12x plus 420, because there was one empty space. And there's 2 empty spaces there, so you end up equaling 100. And both of these equations have the exact same answer, the same solution. Okay, so now you understand why and what we're doing. Let's do it. All right, so again, tonight you have to do it this way. After tonight, you want to add and subtract 0.9 from both sides, go ahead. But most people find this easier. All right, you're going to move it once there, once there, once there. It's always got to be the same amount every place. So I get 15 equals 2x minus 9. And now we're solving it, right? We're not just doing that. 15 plus 9 is 24. 24 equals 2x. Divide both sides by 2. 12 equals x. This time we're going to move it twice. Remember to move it twice. Ooh, and you got to move it twice in 80. All right? You got to move it twice everywhere. So it's 4x plus 120 equals 8,000, right? Because you have to move it twice everywhere. So subtract 120 from both sides, and you're going to get 4x. Now this, you got to do some borrowing here. 7 becomes a 10, becomes a 9, becomes a 10, becomes a 9. Hope you don't need it there. I apologize. And I apologize. It went too fast. We have a 0 there. So 0 minus 0 is 0. There's the 10 minus 2 is 8, another 8, and a 7. So, sorry, so this is 4,000. Man, I'm making mistakes here. So let's clean this up here. And this is 0, and then 8, and then 8, and then 7. 7,880. Divide both sides by 4. And so now you're going to actually have to do some work. 4 into 7,880. 4 into 7 is once. Remainder 3. Bring down the 8. 4 into 38, 9. 4 times 9 is 36. Remainder 2. Bring down the 8. 4 into 28, 7 is 28. We're not done though because we have that 0 to bring down. And the answer to this is 1,970. Now, if you didn't clear the decimals, you would get the same answer. But you would have to divide both sides at the last step. Instead of dividing by 4, you'd be dividing by 0.04. And so if you had to divide by 0.04, what do you have to do? The same thing we did, all right? But you've now made the problem harder keeping those decimals in, right? So we're avoiding that whole trick that we learned earlier in the year by making this 4 right at the beginning rather than waiting till the very end. All right, so you have to be able to do this, even if so one of these has the exact same solution. Well, let's move it once, and then once. So it's 3x, but they all start with 3x, minus 72, all right, that means C is no good, equals 80, right? Because you got to move it in all 3 terms in every location. And if there were 4 terms, you would move it in 4 and so on. You're doing it to both entire sides. Same thing here. We're going to have to move it twice. So you move it twice there, and 7 has a decimal point. You move it twice there. So it's 6x plus 90. So it's looking like B. And let's make sure we got 700 there. Yes, we do. Okay, so we're going to blank times R plus blank equals total. The county fair charges 50 cents per ride and $10.25 to get in. If you have $31.75, write and solve an equation. Find the number of rides you can go on. Okay, so our rate here is clearly 50 cents. All right, I normally don't like to put the zeros there, but I'll leave it. right? The constant is the thing that everyone that's already happened, right? To get in, you had to have paid $10.25. And the total amount of money we have is that right there. I need to write a little neater. That right there, which is $31.75. So we could solve that, but we could also clear the decimal. So I'm going to move it twice there, and twice there. And instead of dealing with the decimals, I'm going to solve 50R plus 1,025 equals 3,175. We're going to subtract 1,025 from both sides. You get 50R equals 0,512. Divide both sides by 50. Because you get to cross out the zeros here, you have to do 215 divided by 5. Well, 5 times 4 is 20. The 4 goes above the 1. Bring down the 5. 5 into 15 is 3, so you get 43 rides. Now, in reality, we're getting this ridiculously high number there because in reality, 50 cents is ridiculously cheap for rides. Okay. All right, a tank sprung a leak. This is one of those problems where the rate is going down. Okay, so a tank sprang a leak and the water level started to drop from 18.9 meters at a rate, it even says rate there. So the rate is 1.2, and I didn't say use hours, but you could use T or at for hours or H for hours. It started at 8.9 and it's going to end up at 3.9. Hopefully people are yelling at me right now through the screen saying this has to be negative. Otherwise, there's no way we're going to get 3.9 over there, right? Because we're going to, the total is smaller than where we started. Okay. Now, we could solve that with the decimals in it, but today we're learning how to clear decimals, so we're going to clear them. So it's negative 12h plus 189 equals 39. Subtract 189 from both sides. Now, right, you cannot do that. You have to flip it over, right? The bigger number has to be up top when you subtract. And so we're going to get 150, but it's negative 150, right? Because it's upside down. Divide both sides by negative 12. Two negatives make a positive. All right, so what is 12? Goes into 150. 12 goes into 15 once. Remainder 3. 12 goes into 30 two times. 2 times 12 is 24. Remainder 6. Decimal straight up, 0 straight down. 12 into 60, 5. It's 12.5, or 12 and a half hours. Okay. When you have these negative rates, you're always going to get two negatives turning into a positive in that very last step. Please know that. If you get a negative hours, that's like you're going back in time. And yes, we could have problems where we go backwards in time, like it happened 5 hours ago, but we're not doing that. All right, write an equivalent equation with whole numbers. So 1, 2, 3 moves there to make it 9x. So that means 3 moves there to make it 800. And 3 moves there to make that 8,200. And that's all it asks. Write an equivalent equation with whole numbers. Those are whole numbers, right? No fractions or decimals. So we're solving this one. We're going to have to move it twice there. So we move it twice there and twice there. So 54 equals 4x minus 30. Add 30 to both sides. 84 equals 4x. Divide by 4 both sides. 4 goes into 84, or 4 goes into 8 twice. 4 goes into 4 twice. And we're done. And 22 equals x. And if you take a calculator and put 22 and do 0.04, or 4 hundredths times 22, then subtract 0.3, 3 tenths, you will get 54 hundredths, 0.54. That is the only solution to that equation, the only number that makes it true. All right. Peter was paid at a rate. It even says the rate there. Okay, so I'm going to put 7.5 so per hour. All right, now that's below minimum wage now, but I wrote this a long time ago. And if you had he has earned $195, including $45 in tips. So the $45 is what's already happened, the constant, and he won a total of $195. Now, okay, you only have one little decimal in here, and typically maybe you'd want to leave it, but let's clear it since we're learning that. So that means we have to make 75h plus 450 equals 1,950. Subtract 450 from both sides. That's a little glitch on my pen there that I'm going to erase. And so minus 450, both sides. 75h equals 005, 1,500. Divide both sides by 75. Now, right, that looks harder than it is. 75 goes into 150 twice. 2 times 5 is 10. All right, bring down the 0. We have to say it goes in 0 times. And so it'll be 20 hours for him to earn that $195 we started with. All right, so we're charging $1.50 per ride, plus $14.70 to get in, and you have $29.70 here. Okay, so let's clear the decimal, 150R, right, we're moving it twice. Here, actually, if we did that subtraction, it'll come out, that decimal will go away, but we'll deal with that. And then we got to move it twice there. We subtract 1,470 both sides. Oh, 150R equals 1,500. That could have come out any nicer than that. Those zeros cross out. 15 into 150 is 10. It's 10 rides. R for rides. That's why we use those letters. Good luck on the homework.